Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the meeting of the Budget Committee. I assume that others members will be coming, and when we get a quorum, we will call roll. I'm not sure if we have a quorum yet. I don't believe so, but we should have one fairly soon. Today we kick off the 2016 budget process in the Assembly by welcoming the Department of Finance and legislative analysts to share their thoughts on the governor's proposed budget for 2016-17 and how we should respond. Joining us today is, let me see, do we have a quorum yet? 11, no, there are 27 members on the committee. Yeah, we need 3 or 4 more members. And when they come, we will call roll. I do want us to start on time because this is an important meeting, and there will be many other meetings, obviously, dealing with the budget where you will get into greater detail. Joining us today is Keely Bosley from the Department of Finance and Mac Taylor, our legislative analyst. Welcome. It's good to see you back again in good condition after last year. Great. We'll hear from both of them and then take members' questions. After the presentations, if you have a question, please indicate to me or the staff that you would like to be on the list to get questions so we can make sure we get everyone has an opportunity to ask a question. Because we intend to use the subcommittees, and I want to focus on this, the subcommittee process to fully and publicly vet the ideas in the governor's budget at a later date, there will be no public comments at this time. And I know that many of our members have lots of questions, but we want to make sure that you know that as chair and members of the subcommittee, you will have a lot of meetings to talk about the budget in great detail and to go back and forth with regard with the staff as well as others concerning what that means and the various components of the budget and how it all fits together. Members, 2016 looks like a good year for California. I think we're all encouraged by what we've seen thus far. We begin the year with consumers feeling better than they have in a decade. We've experienced large increases in revenues, which gives us options for the coming year. We've had 4 years of budget surplus in a row, and now we have billions of dollars in a rainy day fund. People are starting to realize that California's balanced budget is not a fluke. It can be and is the new normal. And as we have a large degree of consensus regarding the problems of facing the state, we need to tackle them, such as fighting poverty, creating affordable housing, fixing our roads, investing in early education, eliminating maximum family grant, and raising the rates for developmental services. We also are in a better position to withstand the future economic downturns. Since the new year began, it seems like Wall Street is intent on trying to stop the economic recovery party before any one of us, except for those who are rich. But we've saved our pennies over the years as a state, and we plan to do more. We can be in a position where we can ignore the volatility of the market somewhat, and our promise to our citizens are not dependent on the federal fund rate or the level of the S&P 500. Members, we are the future of California, and most of us can serve for another 8 to 10 years. We are the ones most vested in ensuring our fiscal plan works, not only in the immediate but in the long term. We aren't interested in overspending. We don't want to look back at 2016 the way folks did in 2007 and spend several lost years trying to recapture the opportunities we have lost. But in the last 4 years, we have made some important investments while the state recovers, and we will continue to do so in the budget year. I'm looking forward to the discussions of our plans and priorities for this year, and we have 4 months to craft our version of the budget. We have a thoughtful and productive process last year, and we hope to have the same kind of process this year. I would like at this time to invite the Vice Chair, Ms. Melendez, to make remarks. But before I do so, let me take an opportunity, first of all, to thank her for her partnership in this last year's process. We didn't agree on every vote, but we found a way to move the process forward smoothly in the committee and in conference and on the floor. And I believe we did an excellent job in making sure that all parties were heard, that we had a budget that we could all be proud of, and that we had no major surprise attacks in the end. Ms. Melendez, do you have any comments?
I do. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate your comments and your your wise caution during your opening comments. And we do, as Republicans, look forward to working with all of you in crafting a responsible budget that reflects the core values of Californians. It is nice to see Ms. Bosler and Mr. Taylor here front and center and looking well rested, which is a good thing. The governor's budget does provide a good starting point for our discussions in the budget this year. We do, as Republicans, wholeheartedly support the concept of saving for the future, considering the dependence of this state on such volatile income taxes and the risk that puts us at. Economists, as well as the LAO's office, though, have rightly warned that a recession could strike within the next 5 years, which could potentially wipe out our entire rainy day fund, which we don't want. We've worked very hard to establish that fund. So we want to fully support the governor's goal of achieving a savings level of 10% of revenues as soon as possible. And there are still, this will come as no surprise to you, areas in which in the budget in which we feel need some improvement. One area in particular is funding to repair our deteriorating transportation infrastructure. And we've had many discussions about this in many special session meetings relating to this matter. And the governor himself has acknowledged the gravity of the situation. So rather than levy new taxes, regressive taxes, which is what has been proposed, we would argue that we need to reevaluate our priorities and fully fund one of government's most fundamental responsibilities, which is maintaining a quality infrastructure. Our infrastructure is the heart of our economy. We all know that, and we do have an obligation to take care of it in a responsible manner. So it is my hope over the next couple of months that this committee will continue to work well together as we have done in the past and deliberate until we have a budget that we can all be proud of and are all satisfied, cover all of our needs. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'd like to hear from Ms. Bosley from the Department of Finance. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Keely Bosler, and I'm the Chief Deputy Director with the Department of Finance, and it's my pleasure to be here this afternoon to present the 2016-17 Governor's Budget. I'm very happy to report that California's economy continues to strengthen, and with that, the state is receiving more revenues. Just since the 2015 Budget Act, this budget revenues have been revised upwards of $5.9 billion. This is enabling the state to provide the highest level ever for K-14 education, also to maintain the affordability of our higher education system, and also take some monies to make a significant investment in upgrading the state's infrastructure. In addition, this budget continues to save for a rainy day fund through Proposition 2 and an additional deposit into the rainy day fund, and also continues to pay down the state's debts and liabilities. I do have a few slides that should be in front of you that I was going to walk through in my presentation today. And despite all of this good news, when we look forward to our long-term forecast, the state's budget continues to be just very precariously balanced over the long term, and actually predicts an operating deficit of nearly $2 billion in 2019-20. And this just assumes the existing obligations and the targeted expansions that are proposed in the governor's budget. Also, over the period, Proposition 30 taxes will expire. And while there's a lot of uncertainty in any future forecast of revenues, there's one thing that we do know, and that is history. And if you look at this graphic, you can see that over the last 15 years, balanced budgets in this state have quickly been followed by huge deficits. And it's really this boom and bust cycle of the past that this budget aims to avoid going forward. On this next slide, one that is familiar to probably all of you at this point is our capital gains, and just really how unpredictable capital gains is. And the state's revenue stream is very dependent on personal income tax, and with capital gains being one of the very volatile components of that revenue stream. This budget estimates the highest ever level of capital gains realizations that the state has seen at nearly $135 billion. But in addition to the volatility of our underlying revenues, and especially those capital gains, it's also important to look at where the state currently is in its economic expansion. This year, the state is in its 7th year of growth, which is 2 years longer than the average length of an economic expansion in the post-World War II era. And so with every day, every month that goes by, every year that goes by, it is inevitable that the state will be facing a recession. And this year, our revenue forecasters and our economists at the Department of Finance built for illustrative purposes a recession scenario. And as you can see on this chart, the top line is our budget forecast, and the one that juts below is our recession forecast. And this recession was really modeled after is a moderate recession. It's modeled more after the dot-com bubble as opposed to the Great Recession that was the most recent recession. And just with this moderate recession, the state could lose up to $55 billion over a 3-year period, starting in 2017-18. And with the lower revenues, the state would have a lower spending obligation on the Proposition 98 guarantee, so some expenditures would go down. But the state would still be faced with a deficit of around $29 billion by 2019-20. Now on the next page, we show a slightly different scenario. So the $29 billion was assuming the governor's level of ongoing commitments versus one-time commitments. But if an additional $4 billion that we're proposing, and the governor's budget proposes to put into one-time expenditures, but if those expenditures were instead plowed into new programmatic spending that was ongoing, the $29 billion deficit in 1920 could quickly balloon to a $43 billion deficit, eclipsing the most recent recession that the state faced. And so given all of this uncertainty and the length of our current economic expansion, one of the more important things that this budget does is continue to pay down the state's liabilities and also saves for a rainy day. And with Proposition 2 that was passed by the voters, the state will be $2.6 billion will be deposited into the rainy day fund, and this is made up of $995 million, which is the true up for the current fiscal year that we're in, 2015-16, and then an additional $1.6 billion that is made for the 2016-17 fiscal year. In addition, another $1.6 billion is set aside to pay down debts and liabilities. This includes payments to special fund to pay special fund loans, and also past liabilities owed to the K-14 schools, and also to continue a commitment made to the UC to pay down some of their retirement liabilities as well. But in addition to this $2.6 billion that's being deposited into the rainy day fund due to the constitutional provisions that Prop 2 placed there, the budget does make a policy choice to deposit an additional $2 billion into the rainy day fund, bringing the balance of the rainy day fund to $8 billion, or 65% of the 10% of general fund revenue target set in the Constitution. In addition to this saving, the budget continues and the administration continues to work towards eliminating the retiree health unfunded liability. This liability has grown to $72 billion, and if left unaddressed, as you can see on the next chart, could grow to nearly $300 billion annually over the next 3 decades. The administration is proposing to tackle this liability by bargaining with our employee groups to get a 50-50 cost sharing to pre-fund this important benefit. And we think this approach will enable the state to afford this benefit over the long term. As I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, this is a very great budget for schools, $71.6 billion to K-14 schools. This is enabling an additional $2.8 billion for the local control funding formula. This will bring this formula to 95% implementation. Enabling more funds to go to the schools where the neediest students are in the state. And these monies across the state are enabling school districts to reduce class sizes, hire teachers, additional teachers, and put other services and supports in all governed by their local control accountability plan to promote the success of their students. The budget also continues very important investments in our higher education system. The focus of these investments is really in maintaining the affordability of the state system. This will be the 5th year that tuition at both the UC and CSU system is kept flat. And there are also additional investments of $160 million that are made to each of the systems. In addition, $737 million in new resources are available for the community college system as well. And for the first time this year, there's a $5 million pilot project proposed to establish zero-cost degrees. This would be absolutely zero cost, including no cost for textbooks. Other efforts that the administration continues is to strengthen paths through education and into the workforce. There's a proposal to improve remediation of those students who do come to college but are not at college level work, with a $30 million investment in our basic skills programs at the community colleges. We also continue the work of easing those transfers from community colleges into both UC and CSU. And there's also a special effort this year to continue to improve graduation rates at all of our campuses, but especially at our CSU. And the budget calls to the CSU trustees to reach beyond the goals that are set in their sustainability plans. We also continue a focus on career technical education with a strong workforce program at the community colleges, which is an additional $200 million. That's to fund work that's been going on for a very long time in the community colleges to align the training at their local community colleges with the skills demands of the employers in their region. And then finally, we continue the work of supporting success for all students with targeted institutional effectiveness partnership at the community colleges to improve, again, success for all students. The budget also makes several investments to counteract the effects of poverty. This budget contains an SSI, SSP grant increase, a state grant increase for the first time since 2006. The budget also continues to implement healthcare reform, including the optional expansion, which expanded healthcare coverage to adults without children, and also low-income adults without children, and also parent and caretaker relatives with slightly higher incomes, up to 138% of the federal poverty level. And this budget reflects for the first time a state's cost share of that optional expansion. Until now, the optional expansion has been paid 100% by the federal government. But starting January 1 of 2017, the state will be sharing in those costs with a 5% cost share, and that will cost approximately $740 million in the budget year. The cost sharing will grow over the next several years to 10% starting in 2020. This budget continues the implementation of the second year of the Earned Income Tax Credit and allocates $380 million for this important new program here in California that piggybacks on the federal Earned Income Tax Credit. As I mentioned, we also continue to implement the local control funding formula, getting those funds to the schools where the neediest students are. And then finally, this administration, in partnership with the legislature, has implemented sick leave for 6.5 million workers and has also increased the minimum wage by 25%, including most recently to $10 on January 1st of this year. This budget also, as I mentioned in my opening, makes a major investment in strengthening our infrastructure. There is an $807 million proposal related to deferred maintenance on our state buildings and facilities. This includes, for the first time, $100 million general fund for our levees in the Delta area, as well as $60 million for the courts, but also additional investments for our parks infrastructure, for the Department of Corrections and state hospitals and other state facilities that went without regular maintenance and repairs during the Great Recession. The budget also sets aside $1.5 billion into a new infrastructure fund to replace or restore 2 Sacramento office buildings and also the building that we're all sitting in today, the Capitol Annex. The Resources Agency building and a building called the Food and Ag Annex are both the other 2 buildings that would be proposed for renovation or replacement. All of these buildings have been found to be very deficient in their physical infrastructures and are not meeting current modern standards for safety. In addition, the budget continues to propose a major transportation financing package of $3.6 billion annually. These funds would be focused on maintaining both the state highway system as well as local streets and roads, but also makes investments in transit and also in key trade corridors around the state. This budget includes reforms, including streamlined project delivery and targeted CEQA exemptions. It also includes staffing flexibilities at Caltrans, as well as performance measures for how those monies are spent on our state highway system. And in addition to the $3.6 billion in new revenues that would be annual revenues that would be ongoing, there is also an additional one-time $879 million general fund commitment through the repayment of some transportation loans. And then finally, this budget makes major efforts to address climate change by providing $3.1 billion in a cap-and-trade expenditure plan, making major investments in reducing greenhouse gas emissions on our transportation system, also reducing short-lived climate pollutants, and also making major investments in our natural ecosystems and their carbon sequestration benefits. And then finally, this budget also contains targeted local climate action investments, as well as investments that specifically target disadvantaged communities. Finally, the state continues its investments related to the drought. Despite the weather that we've been receiving, the state continues to be in a drought, the 5th year of drought here in California, and much of our core water infrastructure continues to be very depleted. Our reservoirs are below levels that they should be at normal levels, and many groundwater aquifers have been greatly overdrafted. So this investment continues the support that to those communities that are the most directly impacted by drought in our Central Valley. Also includes additional monies for CAL FIRE and supporting the very intense wildfire seasons that the state has been experiencing, and then also additional monies to support the cleanup of the devastating fires that impacted both Calaveras and Lake counties this past fall. And so with that, I will end, and we're happy to take any questions.